In April 2025, shots were fired in Pahalgam, India. By early May, the world held its breath. India and Pakistan exchanged limited attacks, resulting in over 100 casualties. Two nuclear-armed nations stood at the edge of all-out war. On May 10, the world was allowed to breathe again. India and Pakistan agreed to a ceasefire. But what if they didn't? What if the 2025 India-Pakistan skirmish escalated into the deadliest war of human history? If you enjoy modern-day alternate history like this one, please consider subscribing. The 2025 conflict between India and Pakistan had the potential to turn into one of the worst wars humanity has ever seen. Together, India and Pakistan are home to 1.7 billion people, over 20% of the world's population. By comparison, during World War II, all the fighting nations combined had 2.3 billion and no nuclear weapons. Before we start though, I need to add a little bit of context. India and Pakistan actually have fought 4 large-scale wars already. However, all of these were fought before either country got its nukes. India got theirs in 1974, while Pakistan got theirs in 1998. The last all-out war was the Indo-Pakistani War of 1971. Since then, there have been several incidents that almost led to war between the two. In 1999, the two countries directly fought over Kargil, with casualties reaching into the hundreds on both sides. 2 years later, a terrorist attack on the Indian parliament triggered both nations to mobilize over 500,000 troops on their borders. Luckily, just like the recent escalation, these conflicts never fully escalated. But why do the two nations fight each other so much? I usually don't put personal stuff into my videos, but I actually worked in India as a volunteer teacher for almost a year. Back then, I saw firsthand how deep the tension runs. Once after a school football match, my students called the losing side Pakistan, and some kids actually cried. My point is, the rivalry isn't just political, it's deeply emotional. Now, I've never been to Pakistan myself, but based on my research, the sentiment there seems to be similar. But why the hate? India and Pakistan used to be united under British rule until 1974, when they brutally partitioned from the empire. Both nations wanted control over Kashmir, but the way the partition played out, India gained control over most of the region. This has prompted Pakistan to start several incursions to reclaim control over Kashmir. So far, they haven't succeeded, but it doesn't really seem like they will stop trying. On top, India is majority Hindu, while Pakistan is majority Muslim, and religious differences, unfortunately, further deepen the us versus them narrative. This is very oversimplified, but you get the picture. Ever since both acquired nukes, India and Pakistan understand that a full war between them could turn nuclear. And that's the only reason why no full-scale war happened since 1971. Neither country wants to risk it all. But that's not what truly matters. It's most crucial that both nations know the other is not willing to risk it. And every escalation from either side makes the other more unsure. And if the spiral of military escalation evolves long enough, sooner or later there will come a point where one nation becomes convinced the other will use nukes. Once that moment is reached, pressing the button isn't the riskiest option anymore. Being the one that hesitates becomes more risky, because the only chance of winning a nuclear conflict is to be the one that launches first. It's the same mentality as during the Cold War. Launching nukes is a bad decision, but being the one that hesitated to launch is even worse. But before that point is reached, there needs to be serious, continuous escalation. So to cover both, this video will consist of 2 parts. The first will cover what the war would look like before it turns nuclear. And the second half will explore what would happen if the button is pressed. On April 22nd, Islamist terrorists launched an attack on Pahalgam in Indian-administrated Kashmir. 26 people died. India quickly accused Pakistan of aiding the terrorists and launched Operation Sindoor, a series of air and missile strikes targeting militant camps and military assets inside Pakistan. Pakistan responded with Operation Bunyan-un-Mahsus, involving mortar shelling and missile attacks on Indian military bases. By May, the Indian and Pakistani Air Force both destroyed important military targets of the other. And here comes our point of divergence. On May 10 in our timeline, over 36 countries, including the US, UAE, Iran, UK and Saudi Arabia, were directly involved in brokering a truce. It took immense diplomatic and political effort to get India and Pakistan to directly communicate with each other, and it paid off. The war didn't escalate. but the ceasefire isn't perfect. To this day, both nations accuse each other of violating the terms, and political tensions are very high. Basically, the ceasefire was, and still is, very fragile. Let's say, on either side, a single high-ranking politician was more skeptical. That's all it needed to fail. So in this timeline, by May 11, the situation between India and Pakistan continues to escalate. After the failed negotiations, Pakistani and Indian negotiators walk away. Back channels go cold. And with no truce in sight, both sides begin to prepare for what many hoped would never come: open war. India, now convinced that diplomacy has failed, expands Operation Sindoor into a sustained military campaign. More airstrikes, more targets. This time, not just militant camps, but key radar system and fuel depots in Pakistan-administrated Kashmir. Pakistan responds with ferocity. Operation Bunyan Mahsus shifts gears. Drone swarms and precision-guided munitions hit Indian military installations in Jammu, Pathankot and Amritsar. Artillery barrages resume across the line of control. By May 16, the war has killed over 800 people. Most are soldiers, but civilians are increasingly caught in the crossfire. In border villages, families flee into the mountains. Schools shut down. The power grid flickers. The United States calls an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council. President Trump, distracted by domestic turmoil, releases a for him unusually carefully worded tweet urging both sides to show maximum restraint. But it's China that moves first, deploying peacekeeping forces along its own borders in Xinjiang, worried the conflict might spill into its western regions. The European Union calls for de-escalation, but it's fractured. Western Europe wants mediation and begins sanctions on arms suppliers. In Poland and the Baltics, defense officials warn that a distracted NATO plays right into Putin's hands. In Hungary and Slovakia, pro-Russian leaders subtly shift tone, hinting at a neutral stance on South Asia. Iran and Saudi Arabia, usually bitter rivals, both push for calmness. The Gulf states worry about oil routes being targeted in the Arabian Sea. The UAE offers to host emergency talks in Abu Dhabi, but neither side shows up. China, meanwhile, quietly moves missile defense systems closer to its southwestern border. In India, the media is on fire. Major TV networks like Republic run wall-to-wall coverage, calling for justice and decisive victory. Government messaging frames the conflict as a fight against terror, but also as a fight for national dignity. Yet, beneath the patriotic slogans, something darker is brewing up. In cities like New Delhi and Mumbai, mobs begin targeting Muslim-owned businesses and homes. Muslim minorities are accused of being Pakistan's sympathizers. In Gujarat, a mosque is destroyed. In Uttar Pradesh, there are reports of Muslims being pulled off buses and beaten. Social media spreads both hysteria and hate. In Pakistan, public opinion is deeply polarized. Many rally behind the army, proud of what they see as a nation standing up to aggression, but others, especially in Karachi and Lahore, fear economic collapse. Anti-government protests erupt over food and fuel shortages. The Pakistani rupee crashes, prompting emergency interventions by China's central bank. Globally, public sentiment shifts. In our timeline, people began picking sides. Now, nobody really cares who started the war or who's in the wrong. What people care about is that both nations are actively escalating, and so very quickly, a strong public disdain for both the Indian and Pakistani government develops in much of the world. People around the globe are afraid. They don't care about right or wrong any longer. They just don't want to witness a nuclear war, but their fears only become more justified. On May 20, Indian Prime Minister Modi orders the execution of the Cold Start Doctrine, a lightning invasion meant to capture territory swiftly without provoking nuclear retaliation. Armored divisions cross into Pakistan, pushing towards Sialkot and Norowal in Pakistan's Punjab. Did India just cross the Rubicon? That's what the world is asking itself. Pakistan is not sure, but they need to be ready. In response, the Pakistani National Command Authority places tactical nuclear weapons on high readiness. Satellite images leak showing missile movements. On Indian TV, military analysts debate how survivable a nuclear war could be. The global mood shifts from fear to panic. In New York and London, stock markets plunge, oil prices soar. In Dubai and Singapore, embassies begin emergency evacuation plans. The world is now treating the crisis not as a regional border skirmish, but as a potential nuclear war. Behind closed doors, American, Russian and Chinese officials engage in urgent trilateral talks, agreeing that no matter the politics, a nuclear exchange must be prevented at all costs. They consider coordinated cyber attacks to disable missile systems, but fear triggering worse retaliation. But secretly, Russia wants this war, because a devastating war in southern Asia is the perfect distraction to escalate in Ukraine. Russia quietly moves summer invasion plans ahead in the timeline and puts tactical nuclear missiles on higher alert. Ukraine, being terrified that once the Indo-Pakistani war turns nuclear, Putin will also press the button, launches Operation Spiderweb sooner on May 25. It's not quite as successful as in our time, but it still destroys over 25% of Russia's strategic bomber fleet, a devastating blow. But the real impact is the shift in global military doctrine. Both India and Pakistan quickly realize how immensely powerful drones truly are. They both fear that a well-coordinated drone attack by the other side, or even the US or China, could dismantle their nuclear arsenals. By June 1, pressure on the two nations is basically unbearable. Millions of people are fleeing in every direction. Both economies are ruined and paranoia is extreme. Now, there are really only two outcomes left. Either India and Pakistan realize their mistakes at the last second and manage to negotiate some sort of truce, or they don't. For a long time, Pakistan only had strategic nuclear weapons. Those are the ones you use as a nuclear deterrence that could destroy cities. But in response to India developing the Cold Start doctrine in the 2000s, Pakistan also developed tactical nuclear weapons, the ones with smaller blast radiuses meant to be used against military targets. Now, India's Cold Start doctrine is in full effect, and Indian soldiers are fighting on the ground in Pakistan. Pakistan's military high command decides that they need a show of force to get India to back out of their territory. They make a crucial miscalculation. On June 10, Pakistan launches a single tactical nuclear missile against a small unit of 100 Indian soldiers fighting inside Pakistan's Punjab region. In the eyes of the Pakistani leadership, they are defending against invading forces. They're not starting nuclear war. They use the nuke on their own territory and against military targets. But to the world, that doesn't matter. For the first time since 1945, a nuclear weapon has been used in war. Now imagine the feeling of finding out about that. You scroll through TikTok, Instagram or Reddit and see a meme about Pakistan nuking India. You think no way and scroll. Then you see another and you decide to check the news. And it's true.
Has nuclear war just begun?
That's exactly the same question high-ranking Indian generals and Prime Minister Modi are asking themselves. In the Indian nuclear bunker command center, fierce debates are breaking out. Moderate politicians are urging Modi to hesitate and military generals urge him to launch. They argue, "Sir, if we don't launch now, they will. We need to strike first to minimize our casualties." And as bleak as that sounds, the generals have a point. Pakistan escalated drastically, and India has no guarantee Pakistan won't escalate even further. They believe a larger strike is imminent. To them, Pakistan crossed the radioactive Rubicon. They misinterpreted Pakistan's limited strike, and a single misinterpretation during a high-stakes nuclear standoff is all it needs for hundreds of millions to perish. 40 minutes after the tactical nuke went off, Narendra Modi orders a full-scale nuclear strike on Pakistan. "160 nuclear missiles just detonated across Pakistan. They struck every major city, including Islamabad, Karachi and Lahore, and military targets like airfields, command centers and missile bases. 50 million innocent souls perished in an instant, and that's just the beginning." The goal of the nuclear strike was to limit Pakistan's ability to strike back as much as possible. But Pakistan isn't wiped off the earth. Their infrastructure, electricity and communication collapsed. But India didn't destroy Pakistan's entire atomic arsenal. 40 out of the 170 nuclear warheads they have remain. Minutes after nukes struck Islamabad, nuclear warheads vaporize New Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune, Ahmedabad, Chennai, Kolkata, Jaipur, Agra, Surat, Bhopal, Lucknow, Nagpur, Udaipur and Varanasi. The remaining nuclear warheads target major military sites. Another 30 million people just perished. Within a single hour, more people died than during the entire Second World War. India miscalculated. Pakistan's retaliation strike was stronger than Modi and his generals anticipated, and now they're sitting in some bunker to witness what they caused. Within hours, millions more die in both Pakistan and India due to injuries. By the end of June 10, the darkest day in human history, over 100 million people lost their lives. A new global panic sets in. To remind you again, India and Pakistan combined house around 20% of the global population. 1.6 billion people are now directly threatened by nuclear fallout. By June 11, the largest migration crisis in history begins. Indian and Pakistani refugees make their ways towards China, Bangladesh, Iran, Nepal and Afghanistan. But fallout clouds do the same. And with them, the fear of nuclear winter sets in globally. People begin looting stores while social media drives panic about imminent nuclear fallout. Major cities like New York, London and Paris see widespread chaos. Simultaneously, global markets plunge to historic lows. Oil prices skyrocket. The UN calls emergency summits, while China and Russia seal their borders. The EU and US begin rationing fuel and evacuating citizens from Asia. On June 12, Nepal and Bhutan begin mass evacuations as radiation spikes drastically. Roads out of India and Pakistan are choked. Millions are fleeing on foot. By June 13, over 3 million refugees enter Afghanistan alone, leading to massive clashes with the Taliban and local warlords. Pakistani and Indian border guards have long abandoned their posts. South Indian states like Kerala and Tamil Nadu cut contact with central command. Sikh separatists in Punjab seize control of relief zones. Kashmir, the region this whole war started over, turns into an ungoverned war zone. In Pakistan, surviving officers try to assert control but fail. The Taliban and other terrorist groups begin claiming territory in the vacuum. Oil prices surpass over $500 per barrel. Persian Gulf states go into lockdown. Oil and diesel on the black market becomes more valuable than gold. Global trade fully breaks down. By June 14, worldwide protests erupt. People demand that their governments disarm their nukes. Mass riots break out in major cities. Nuclear-armed powers in their cities like New York, London, Paris and Beijing are hit the hardest. The bomb killed the world becomes a global protest slogan. The internet meanwhile is going absolutely berserk. People use memes and dark humor to cope with the grim reality they are now stranded in. Food supply chains collapse across Asia and Africa, and experts warn of large-scale famines. India was a top rice, wheat and pharmaceutical exporter. That's now gone. By June 20, 10 days after day zero, the casualties double. Within just 10 days, 100 million more people perished due to injuries, radiation poisoning and water shortages. And the UN warns that within another month, the number could double again when famines begin to hit. The United States, EU and China begin bilateral talks for long-term humanitarian aid strategies. They also develop strategies to ensure that no remaining nuclear weapons fall into the wrong hands. But not all nations are this willing to help. Iran escalates its nuclear program drastically, and Russia launches its full-scale summer offensive. Putin on national TV declares that he will not hesitate to press the button should NATO intervene in Ukraine. Now, this threat feels realer than ever. On June 22nd, North Korea detonates 3 nuclear warheads in its own territory in a grotesque show of force. These events further panic the global population. By July, the UN estimates that around 1.2 billion people have been displaced or are suffering under a critical humanitarian crisis. Truly, the scale of this tragedy is impossible to put into words. To compare the scale of death and destruction, this is like if 3 World War IIs happened in less than a month. 2 simple miscalculations doomed humanity. The first was Pakistan calculating India will back down after a limited tactical nuke. The second was India calculating Pakistan will launch a full-scale nuclear attack. People in this world are a mix of paranoid and numb. Entire societies are suffering from severe PTSD. These people, the you and me from an alternate world, witnessed the worst event in human history. A scale of destruction so unimaginable, numbers so high, we can't even grasp them. And the worst part, it's not even over yet. Iran is determined to develop nuclear weapons. Putin is increasingly threatening to use them in Ukraine. And North Korea already detonated 3. A pattern is repeating itself. Humanity isn't even learning from its mistakes. Will the Great Nuclear War soon be just the overlooked prequel to a war even worse? That is impossible to predict. But here's one thing I can say for certain. People think a nuclear war will be the last war, the war to end all wars. But over 100 years ago, World War I was called the same. Okay, so that was heavy. I know, our world can feel dark sometimes, but the point of these videos isn't to scare you, it's to make you think. And maybe sometimes it helps to remember things could be so much worse. If you found this scenario thought-provoking and interesting, please consider subscribing, there's more to come. My next video will be about China invading Taiwan, which is also quite dystopian. If you want early access to that video and some other exclusive perks, consider joining my Patreon. A special thanks to those who already support me there. They helped make this video possible. Now, if you want a video about a timeline that's better than ours and way better than this one, check out my video about Al Gore winning the 2000 election.